Hello there, Jose Rodriguez, aka J Toolman 1949. I got a message from a viewer on my machining and miniature making channel, and he says he remembers when he was watching me on his VHS, and I thought, wow, that's a long time ago. So I would like, if you would not mind listening to, I would like to tell you my story and how I came about doing this sort of thing. And as you can see, I'm standing in my shop, which is not the neatest place I've ever seen or neatest shop I've ever seen, but it works out for me quite well. Anyway, it all started about, I would say, 20 some plus years ago. I was fresh back from Europe. I was in the military, and I came back from a European tour of 3 years, and I landed back in the Washington, D.C. area. And of course, that's where the Washington Dollhouse and Toy Museum resides. At that time, it is now closed, sadly. But anyway, so I recontacted or rekindled my relationship with them because I had been gone for 3 years. Well, things were kind of the economic downfall at that time. It was about 1983 or 4. And so I decided, well, let me get into a little bit of metalworking because I need to make some fittings for my miniatures. I wanted to make some little knobs for my drawers and such indoors. And so the only way that I could think of doing that was using a small lathe and brass tubing or brass rod and machining them by hand. So I looked into the TEG, and that was one of the nicest little lathes. I saw it advertised once in a magazine, and it was a 4-inch diameter swing, and I thought, wow, that'll be great. I can actually do that also for my woodworking, for my miniature tabletops that are round. I can machine them perfectly. That'll work out just fine. So I got into that, and then I discovered a magazine that's still out. It's still being produced quarterly, Home Shop Machinist. And back in the day, they had a pen pal section. This is before internet. So I wrote a letter to a guy out in Oregon, and forgive me, my friend, but I don't remember your name right this minute. But he also used the TEG, and that's how I hooked up with him. And so we were both TEG microlathe users, and we started to correspond, and I started to send him VHS cassettes of stuff that I was doing here in the shop. And he did the same. Except his stuff was horrible. Not that my stuff is the greatest ever, but his stuff was just horrible. I mean, if I could just, please hold the camera steady. I really couldn't tell much of what he was doing. But he loved what I was sending him. So he said to me, you really should make a full-length video on VHS and try to market it. In fact, I'll do that for you. I went, wow, this was the fledgling internet. And he had a website that was all text-based. There was no photos, no graphics, nothing. Just text and links. And so I would send him a box of VHS tapes, and he would sell them. And then he would give me a cut. And that continued on. Okay, so then, at that point, nothing really went further. I was just using my little lathe, and I learned how to make tiny little engines and parts and things like that. And then I discovered the 7x10, which I have an old one sitting over there. I'll show you that in a video next time. And that thing is a wreck right now. I got it from Harbor Freight Tools out in California. And at that time it was expensive. It was like $800, but I think that's like the original version. And the control panel for the DC motor was horrible. The motors didn't last but maybe a year if you were extremely lucky. They would burn out. And so I have it running on a treadmill motor just like I saw in my little so-called TEG Frankenstein lathe. And so that worked out just wonderfully. And I got the DC motor from a surplus house. They basically took them out of brand new treadmills. So I was using that, and that moved me into making steam engines and projects of that sort. And all of a sudden, I decided to start writing articles on that lathe because it was the most hated and most unliked lathe in the world. Nobody wanted it, and yet all the critics didn't really own one. They were just parroting what they had heard from someone else. So I decided, well, what the heck? I have one in front of me. I know the pros and cons. I know what's bad, what's good. Let me write some articles about it. So I started to write about it. And I guess the popularity got to such point where it began to be purchased by people. And more people became owners of that lathe. And so we had to form a user group. And a man from Virginia and I formed this user group. And that became huge. And so it had over 150,000 members within a couple of years. And at that point I thought, wow, that's amazing. And then things in family life got in the way and I stopped participating in that forum. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I get this email from a company called LittleMachineShop.com. They're out in California, in fact in Pasadena, my old stomping grounds. That's where I used to live and grew up. So I said, well, fine, what do you want me to do? He says, we would like to carry your VHS tapes. I said, what? So I got back with them and we made a deal and they became my distributor. At that time I had a fledgling little website where I was also selling on my side. But they were selling in much higher volumes than I could possibly sell because I wasn't really reaching the numbers of people. And why were they able to do that? Well, guess what they did? They started selling or promoting, let's just say. They didn't really sell them, but they started selling every single part that makes up that 7x10. So they had that stuff on stock for anyone who needed parts. Wow! Now everybody who stripped the gear, everybody who burnt out a panel, anybody who broke something on it could go to this local company in Pasadena and get every single part, every nut, every bolt, every washer, everything they had for sale, including the castings. So I said, wow, wait a minute, is that because of what I originally did? Because let me tell you, that was an unknown lathe, nobody wanted it, everybody hated it, and unfairly, I might add, because those people really didn't even own one. They had just heard from so-and-so, from so-and-so, from so-and-so. They were just passing off bad information. Even if the lathe was bad, you gotta have one in front of you for you to be able to have the right to malign it, in the way that they were doing. So I thought, wow. So I guess if you really think about it, I guess I was responsible for the formation of a company who now just supports that lathe. Wow. So I discussed that with the owner, and the owner says, yeah, I realized that's what happened because my partner told me about the group. And since there were 150,000 members and owners of this lathe, we decided to start this company. And so now they're huge. They sell everything. They do shows all over the country. So during that time, DVDs became more popular. VHS was just bulky and crappy, and the resolution was not good enough for people's better and better TV sets. And then flat screens came about and so on. And the digital age hit us, so I went to DVD. And unfortunately, I only had the original VHS video files to work from, so they're not the greatest. The earlier ones are not the greatest, even though they're now on DVD. So now I'm shooting with high def, and hopefully that will improve matters immensely. So then after that, I got a call from a company in Australia and a company in the UK. Unfortunately, that one in the UK has decided to stop selling any DVDs, so I'm out of luck with them now. So my only current source for sale is my website or LittleMachineShop.com. And there's also another company called, I think it's Smithy, and there's a company that sells a lot of technical material, and I don't have the name right now because it just escapes me. And they also sell, but that's very, very sporadic. So that's it. If you want to see my full-length videos, go to LittleMachineShop.com or go to my website, which I will put at the end of the video or in the description of the video. And so that's what I do. This is what I do now, and I'm able to make some mad money for my retirement, which helps a lot for my tool purchases and anything I want to try out that's new. So that's it. That is my story. Now, the story took two swerves. It was one toward the machining side, one toward the miniature side. And if you have looked at my latest video of the Damascus Heritage Museum display that we put up, my club and I, you could see what we do, and that is what we do. In the late 70s, I actually was selling quite well, and a lot of famous people bought my stuff that were, closet collectors of miniatures did buy my stuff, including the most famous is Elizabeth Taylor, and a couple of big newspaper owners out in the East Coast. But that's all gone by the wayside. I don't really do that much anymore. I want to get back into it, but it's too much of a pain, I tell you. If you produce something that's unique and good, you will be bombarded, and so then it becomes your full-time job. And as much as I love to do it, let me tell you, my eyesight went to hell, and the headaches that I was getting were just beyond description. So I think my health right now is more important than any money that I would make doing that. But I occasionally make pieces and I sell them to certain people who seek me out, So that's it. I didn't want this to be a brag fest. But that's my story, and this is where I'm at now. I do the machining, I do the miniatures, I do the printing, which is my main channel. I'm sure you may have seen that. And that's it. I enjoy my retirement life. My wife and I trying to stay healthy. She's having some problems, but we'll deal with that. And so that is it. I hope you like this little story of mine. This is my story and how I got into this. So I hope you enjoyed it. So until the next time, happy machining, happy miniature making. Bye-bye.